Nebraska in the portal, I just don't know how much they're going to be able to do, because they've got to drop players unless the settlement doesn't get approved, and it just sort of languishes. Nebraska is going to have to obviously shed some players off its current roster, including players that in a different roster size universe they'd probably love to have. So what I would tell Husker fans is there are going to be a couple guys, if the 105 thing is approved, that are probably going to leave that you're like, oh man, that's too bad. That guy might end up being pretty good somewhere else. And they might be able to add a Marty Brown and maybe a few other players out of the portal, but I think they're 90% of the team that they're going to be rolling with next year is already on the roster.
So Sam, I want to stay on the, I guess, sort of Marty Brown-ish page for a minute.
That's great.
Do you think that running back is a place they should address, whether, even if Marty Brown is a no on either side, do you think they should address that regardless? And is there any other position? I know we're talking about probably a very few number of actual people for the reason that you mentioned, but where else, what other position group are you looking at as like, hey, I'd like to see a little bit there?
Yeah, so they have 5 scholarship running backs, 2 of whom are true freshmen. So if you add another one, you're at 6. Obviously, addition, easy math. But the reality is,
I like integers, Sam. I like whole numbers are good.
Yeah, you're gonna somewhere in there. You're gonna have a scholarship crunch, and anytime you're adding a 6th running back, you're accepting the fact that somewhere down the line, somebody else might leave, and they might leave right away. So, like, you have to go in there with that understanding. I do think Marty Brown's a really good player. I think he's done it. Kwinten Ives has not really done it, right? Now, if you put Kwinten Ives at North Dakota State, would he have had 1,000 yards? I really don't know.
Yeah, they're very different runners.
They are. Yes, they are.
Marty's the guy that runs behind his pads. He's got a low center of gravity. Ives is a little more upright, kind of on the balls of his feet. They're very different runners.
Very true. And so I think Kwinten has had to learn how to run between the tackles based on his size. So I think that's something to watch. North Dakota State's offense, I would describe it as very similar in some ways to what Satterfield was doing. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Holgerson's going to be doing all of those things. And Marty Brown was very versatile in that role. Usually he was in an I formation. They had another running back who was usually in the shotgun plays.
I think he wants to catch the rock too. You know what I mean? I think that's appealing to him.
Yep. So one thing I did once he went in the portal is I watched, they played Southern Illinois. I watched that game. And you can watch about 30 minutes of highlights of every game on YouTube. And then there's sometimes you'll get the full game. So I went and watched again the full game against East Tennessee State because I'd already watched Jalen George in that game. And then I watched Towson. So I watched like 40. And I think, the way they used him was really effective. He's really good with a lead blocker. He's fearless. He runs through people. He runs over people. He drags people. I think he's a running back that Nebraska would like to have, but of course it comes down to cost. How do you fit him into revenue sharing? Well, I don't know. How do you fit him into NIL? Well, that depends on what 1890 and some of the people with deeper pockets are willing to provide. And so that'll be an intrigue worth watching over the next week. I know, Miami obviously is apparently in the mix according to Chain Sport. I think that's their on-3 site.
Yeah.
I know West Virginia could be. There's other schools that will have money, and Nebraska has to decide, how much they want to pony up. And then it comes down to the role. And then it also comes down to what is Ives going to do? You spent 2 years developing him. Is he going to stick around?
Sam, let me ask you something. Like, especially with, you do a ton of work with high school. It's always the Super Six influence. And you heard Coach Rhule answer your question about, in-state and, you can't serve 2 masters. How much of guys that come back around do you think they have to talk about or through the previous courtship, right? Do you get the sense that players that weren't as embraced early on in their recruiting out of state versus in state will come back around? Because there could be a couple of guys that come back into the fold that are pretty good players, right? Do you think they'll have to overcome that a little bit?
Perhaps if we're talking about the kids that are committed to Iowa State, I don't know that those guys will necessarily.
I don't see anybody in that group. I
Right.
think that have gone elsewhere and may come back. Not currently, not guys that aren't in college yet.
No, I think though. I think if we're talking about guys that are currently somewhere else, I think Nebraska's put themselves in a pretty good position.
Okay.
I think they, obviously Marty Brown was not going to be a factor because he had already committed to North Dakota State and Rhule got here, and I think their goal was to go out and get Jalen Lloyd, and I think at the time they got here, they had a ton of running backs in the room. They, I think Marty committed, signed with North Dakota State that December. Then they went out and, they had already added A.J. Allen and they had Anthony Grant. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think Marty's one of those situations. I don't think a couple of these other guys that they tried to recruit are those situations. I think in this current group of players, it could be more challenging. I think, in part because Iowa State didn't offer these kids as sophomores, just so we're clear. They offered some of the kids as juniors, and then the rest of them they offered here in the last 3 months. But Iowa State they went in and they went and said they bought low. They said, you know what, you guys don't have any power offers. We think you're going to be a power conference player. We're going to come in here and we're going to get you. I'm going to guess that they aren't costing as much money as some of the guys Nebraska's going after. And I think Iowa State's, taking a risk, but it's a strategy that I think could really pay off for them. Some of these kids in Nebraska, you get them in a D1 program for 3 years, and they develop, and they're all of a sudden they're really good football players. And maybe they're from wherever program they're from, but then they get to again in Iowa State, and Kean Kaiser could be a starter in 3 years, 2 years. Barry Freeze, the son of Gabe, that guy can play. That guy could be a really good player at Iowa State. So I don't know if this current crop fits that, but I do think that everybody up till now has had really positive relationship with Nebraska, and the kids I talked to for this Iowa State story, by the way, they don't have anything bad to say about Nebraska because Nebraska didn't string them along, and Nebraska didn't lie to them. Rhule didn't lie. He didn't do anything that made him feel frustrated him. There just wasn't a lot of connection. And so I think with the previous classes, there was quite a bit of connection. They could only take so many. And I think Nebraska put its best foot forward. So there's a chance that some of these guys will come back for sure.
Did you like the answer about serving two masters? I thought that was a unique perspective from a, I was going to say a biblical perspective, but I get the fact that he's well versed in the word, but the answer seemed very apropos.
Yeah, and it was in relation to the recruiting. So he didn't know I was going to ask him that question. I don't think anybody knew I was working on the story. And so I wasn't sure what I was going to get. I thought I might get a shrug. I don't know. I thought I
you could tell he was thinking about it too. Did you check out his body language?
Yeah,
he was really thinking.
I think someone had been talking to him about it, and it may be that it's frustrating to him because the reality is Nebraska signed 22 in-state players in his first 3 classes, and that was 6 more than Scott Frost signed in his entire tenure for scholarship players. And so Matt Rhule put a lot into recruiting in-state guys, and so he has nothing to he could have mentioned that. He has nothing to be ashamed of as it relates to his record. I think the point that he was trying to make, and it wasn't just about in-state recruiting, but it was about anything, is it's like everybody for many, many years now, I think there was an over concern about how to do this or how to do that. And who do you need to talk to? And who do you need to consult? And who do you need to please? And I think he is at a point where the only thing that really matters, and I think he understands this now, is winning. And I wish it weren't like that, but it really is important at this point. And so I think the decision he made about the spring game was in reference to winning. I'm not sure I quite agree 100% with his decision, but I understand why he made it, and that's more important than whether I agree. So I think what he's trying to say, and when they do huddle breakdowns, they go 1, 2, 3, win, and they got a thing up on the Husker Vision that says win. Like they're not. It's not about at this point it's winning the rep and winning the day, winning the down, winning the game. Like they need to win because otherwise the whole thing is just going to get. It's like a fast moving train, and you don't think USC is a board. USC is a board. And you don't think UCLA is a board? They're a board. I don't know who stepped up with money for Nico Iamaleava, but somebody did, because I don't think he was going to go to UCLA unless he had that money. And so like everybody's getting on the train, and Nebraska's got to get on too. And in order to get on, they got to win. And I think he understands that, and I think he's trying to make decisions that are shaped by the desire to give Husker fans what they want, which is championship.
Sam, how much of the in-state recruiting strategy do you think is simply, hey, it's winning now or nothing else matters? And how much of it, like, it seems like a lot of these guys, if it weren't for the roster limits, would still have an opportunity to come play at Nebraska. Am I reading too much into that, or is it that simple?
Well, they wouldn't have, they'd have to come as walk-ons. I mean, I think Iowa State's extending some sort of financial package that makes these kids want to go. I don't think Jet Tomlin would be coming here. Atsmala would be coming here. I think they have their quarterback in Dayton Raiola. So,
and you may have another one. You may have another one on May 1st or whenever he decides.
And he's 20. Yeah, he's 27.
I get it, but I mean, it matters.
He's a good player.
Yeah.
He's a good player, and so I don't think the situation with Jet's a little different than the other ones, because he could have gone to about 12 schools, and he picked Iowa State because he thought that was the best one. Some of these other situations, I think Nebraska may well have offered him. Remember that Donovan Jones didn't get an offer.
Yeah, he was super late. Yep, he was way late.
Yeah. And so, like, he didn't get his offer till summer camp. And that's because Rhule wants to see those guys in camp. And so, they saw Jace Reynolds last year in camp. They gave him an offer. At that time, I'm not sure we knew what the roster limit was going to be. So I think some of it's that. Honestly, I think it's that. And I've said this already. It didn't make any difference whether they're going to have a roster limit or not. Some of these guys are going to leave. Now, they cut some of the walk-ons, but like they have so many scholarship defensive backs that like it's going to be hard. It would have been hard even if they didn't have a 105-minute limit to sell those guys on. Well, hey, you want to stick around and be a fourth teamer? Like, you don't play that many defensive backs during a game. You want those guys to have some chemistry, and so there's some ball players on this team that are probably just going to go because they're going to go to their exit conversation, and Rhule's going to tell them, hey, look, I mean, you're in a really loaded room, and the reality is we see you playing here. You're going to be a sophomore. We think you're a third team guy. If you want to go to group of 5 school over here, you might be able to start. We have connections there. What do you think? Like, it's just going to be one of those deals where they were going to lose some guys anyway because they signed so many players in his first 2 classes. They signed a ton of players, and I think they signed those players with the intention of bringing them here to compete. And then the guys that didn't quite make the cut were going to not necessarily be shown the door, but they were just going to be told very honestly where they were. And I think they assumed that natural competition would lead those guys to say, well, you know what, guys, I love you, but I want to play college football. And if you're telling me I'm third or fourth team, then I'm going to go somewhere where I can play. And I think that's going to happen. And so that was going to happen either way because of the number of players that they signed in those first 2 classes. They signed ginormous classes, including in-state guys.
Yeah. And
of the in-state guys that have left, 4 receivers and a quarterback, but everyone else is still there.
Hey, I want you to listen to something real quick, Sam. Shane, hold the clip, and I'll get off of this just because. The duality in me saying this, Sam, is guys that go to Iowa State or whatever, right? I was a huge Bramer guy. He's a Sunday guy. I'm for kids. I don't care where you go to school. I want you to have the best opportunity to play. But let's not act like Iowa State isn't a really good program in terms of development, because I'm just telling you. 8-5 in 2017, 8-5 in 2018, 7-6 in 19, 9-3 in 20, 7-6 in 21, 4-8 in 22, 7-6 in 2023, 11-3 in 2024. Every year they've had a better record than Nebraska. So one thing I think we've got to stop doing for our own sanity is worrying about or the compare and contrast of who's doing what with in-state versus out-of-state. If their programs on the surface have been more successful than us, like we got to mind our own business and kind of get back to what the theme that you were talking about with what you see around the stadium, what you hear Coach Rhule say, like just win. Like if you win, nobody's going to care about the periphery, right? They just won't. I just, but in the same vein, I just don't want us to act like, and not me and you, and because I think you know how I feel about Iowa State's program and Haycock and Matt Campbell in general, but like that's a good program. So
yeah,
like, and I trust I trust their evaluations too, right? So I mean, I don't know why we kind of get this sentiment like we kind of thumb our nose, but because Iowa State's it's a good program.
It is a good program. I think a couple of things that I would say is that, you know, Nebraska there's probably two things that are true. One, the league that Iowa State plays in is not as hard
Understood.
as the league Nebraska plays.
That is understood, but I don't want to slight the players because of that. They can only control what they can control. But I do understand that sentiment, and I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Right. So not at all. So there's that, one. Two, Iowa State, having the league that it's in, Iowa State has acclimated and understands its own league better than Nebraska appears to have understood the Big Ten and the entire time Nebraska.
At least early on. I think they're getting
Iowa
it now.
State,
yeah.
They're getting it. But Iowa State, like, really plays to its league. And I tip my hat. 3, their quarterback play has been vastly better than Nebraska's over the last decade. And that's an area where Nebraska can learn. Now, I do think that Nebraska's quarterback play is going to be equal to or better than Iowa State this year. I think last year, Beck was probably a little bit better than Rhule, but not by much. That has been a huge chasm between the two programs. And, it was 4 years of Brock Purdy. And that's no joke. It helped them. I know that they weren't good every year that Brock Purdy was there. And Breece Hall is a very good player. Don't get me wrong, but man, did Brock Purdy help them?
Yeah, look who they were getting drafted defensively. I mean,
right. So it's such a help to have good quarterbacks in your program. And then Hunter Deckers was a good player. Obviously, what happened. But now they got another guy that's there that's really good. So like they're really good, and their quarterback play has been really good. Is Hunter Decker the one I'm thinking of that went to Iowa Western? Is that the guy that went there?
Yeah, the gambling deal.
Yeah. So, like that guy was really good when he was at Iowa State. And then the guy that's replaced him, really good. Like you just can't. Now you can look at the pieces that Iowa State has, and yeah, they got a couple of receivers that were good. They had, and obviously Breece Hall was a very good player, but they haven't had a ton of linemen. They haven't had elite pass rushers. They coach to a system on defense that fits the league they're in, and their quarterback play has been outstanding. And I think you can credit to some degree Jake Waters, who is there now. I know Jake hasn't been there for the entire time that Matt Campbell's been there, but Jake Waters deserves some credit there. So there's things Nebraska can learn from what Iowa State has done, and then there's things that Nebraska has to do on its own because of the league that it's in. And the Big Ten is a harder league. Rhule was right about that.
100%.
It's not rude to say it, but if you gave Iowa State Nebraska's schedule, and you swapped the schedules, I think Iowa State would have been hard pressed to win 11 games. I think they would have been like, oh dang, Illinois is pretty good. Yeah, they are. Yeah, they're pretty good, and they're very physical, and they have a very good head coach, and so on and so forth. Man, it's Indiana's better than we thought, or geez, USC's got way more talent. I think when Nebraska went out there, again, we agree that Nebraska should have won that game, but you could see USC's talent on the field. They had some guys that Nebraska didn't have. And so, stuff like that. It's a very hard context that Nebraska has to play into. And I'm trying to tell people, I've told people this many times now, it's only going to be tougher this year. The teams they're playing have largely improved, except Indiana swapped out for Michigan State. But, don't sleep on anybody they're playing. It's going to be a tough road. Nebraska's got to play really good football to win 9 games in 2025.
Yeah, let me get your out on this, Sam. And now, partly I'm bugged by people either want stories or they want a pound of flesh to be able to hold Coach Rhule accountable. And I don't have really any problems with wanting to hold a coach accountable, except like don't make up stuff, right? You can have your own opinion, but you don't get your own set of facts. I want you to listen to this and tell me what you think he was talking about, and is he specific or not when he makes the comment? Shane?
I'm out there every day, and I'm like, hey, red zone lockout, FUD, and Dane Keys, like, make it live. Emmett Johnson, I mean, they love football, so this is the team I've been waiting for in terms of that. This is the team I've been waiting for. When you have a fourth-year guy who started in the SEC, you've got
Shane.
Emmett Johnson, who's a starter.
Was he specific or not, Sam?
Well, at the very end, I asked him.
Yes, you did.
Because I wanted more specificity, and he explained it, what he thought, and so yes, by the end, I thought he was very specific that what he feels like he had is a group of players who really want to go do this thing the way that he wants them to, and that they don't have. I was talking to somebody earlier in the spring, and they just said, well, a lot of the guys that don't buy in are all gone. They used a different phrase. But
did it seem like to you that people like want their pound of flesh to be able to hold something against him when they clearly didn't understand the context in which he said it?
I haven't heard anybody like that.
Okay.
But yeah, I understand. If somebody reads into that this team, that what he was saying there is this team's going to win 11 games. That's not what he said. That's not what he said. Now, he did talk about the difference between the Big 12 and the Big 10.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of why I asked you, right? Because it all builds.
I'd go beat the Big 12 team to start the season. I will say that.
Mm. Well, they'll have every opportunity.
Well, they should.
Right?
They should be. They should. I appreciate, and I've watched more Cincinnati football than I could care to admit.
Yeah, and so that they've got two good Sunday guys, for sure, fire Sunday guys that I think could really pose some problems for Nebraska, especially
Absolutely, but let's be honest. In the fourth quarter, Nebraska should run the football and stop them. But I'm not trying to get a pound of flesh when I say that. I'm just saying that, like, Matt Rhule is a confident guy. He likes his team. There's nothing wrong with that. And I did not think that he said in any way, shape, or form that the team was going to win 11 games. I do feel like if you were to ask him, now, when it comes to non-conference games, if you don't see an SEC team on that schedule, do you believe that the preparation of the Big Ten should put you in a position to win every non-conference game you play? I think he would be like, ultimately, yes. There might be an exception to the rule if you played, I don't know, Clemson. But
who's going to be pretty good.
I think he believes that the league that they're in is preparing them. But you're not going to hear, once they go into the league, you're going to hear him talk like Lou Holtz, like, again, about every opponent.
Yeah.
Because
but in the same vein, though, he's got to be able to know that, like, Veet and Braswell are first-time defensive coordinators for Cincinnati, right? Like, you have to be able to go into a game like that thinking you should have some sort of an advantage with the experience you bring back. Things like that you're talking about. Yeah, I get it.
Yes, I mean, I think they should beat Cincinnati because I think they have a better football program than Cincinnati. But you will hear him when they get into the Big Ten. Michigan State's a monster, and Michigan's a monster, and and oh my God, Maryland. He will never diminish any of those teams in that league because he already knows how hard it is to win one Big Ten game. And I'm trying to tell people this too, like, guys, the Big Ten is way better. He's right about this. It's way better than the other leagues other than the SEC. And I think it's better than the SEC right now. I really do. And so, like, people just I think they have a hard time wrapping their brains around that because the Big Ten they grew up with was inferior to the Big Eight. But that is not the case now. Like, it's just, you got to go and watch all the games, and you got to go down before the game or watch all the rosters, and you're just like, Holy crap!
At
When Michigan
least
State comes
at
in
least
here,
at the top of the Big Eight. Certainly not at the bottom of the Big Eight was the Big Ten battle.
right, not the bottom, but like the point being that like when Michigan State comes to town, I'll go down on the field and look at their roster. I always do this. Michigan State's huge. I mean, you'll be like, my God, everybody's big. And Colorado doesn't look like that. God bless Colorado and Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. Those guys are great players, and they're going to go in the top 10 of the draft. But Colorado doesn't have players like that across the board. And so, like, I'm just trying to prepare people for the test that the league is. Like, it's a test, and people better buckle up because this could be a hell of a team, and they could go 8-5, and it could be a heck of a good football team. That's how good this league is.
That's our guy, Sam McKewon, Omaha World Herald. Great stuff as always, Sam. We appreciate the time.
Take care.
Thanks, Sam.